Hey, what's up? Thanks for attending if you're here. Thanks for watching this later if you are not. I want to talk today about some different workflow tools that content engineers can be using. So just to step back a minute, right? We all know about, we've all been using AI, we've all been experimenting with it. And one of the key things that AI does for us is it makes what was previously unstructured data, which is words and articles and content, it makes it so that you can put workflows on top of it and automate it just like you would automate sending an email or gathering a piece of data from your website or updating something in your CRM. That is the shift that we're talking about today. That's the thing, is that all of a sudden we can programatize and mechanize our content systems in a way we couldn't before. And that makes the content system idea much more important. It makes it so that we can manage whole libraries at once instead of thinking about individual articles all the time. And it makes it so that we can get better and more predictable performance at a lower cost. So before I start showing you what you came here to see, most likely, which is these differences between these automation tools, that's what I just want you to be aware of before I start getting into the details. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about today, is building these AI workflows for content, building workflows, putting together steps, putting together pseudo code for machines that grabs content from places and does stuff to it and then does other things to it. And that's really key for your content system in 2025. Okay, so there are lots of ways of doing this. There are lots of ways of using LLMs and using AI. So some people are writing articles and they are taking all the notes that they would usually use and all the context they would use, and they're going to Claude or they're going to ChatGPT and they're saying, hey, Claude, ChatGPT, write me an article based on, whatever it is, how to test your APIs, whatever, how to balance a checkbook, whatever you want. Hey, go write me an article. And here's some context and information. And that's great. And then the LLM sort of spit out an article and maybe you do something with it. Some writers are going further and they are using Claude and using ChatGPT interactively. And they're going in and saying, hey, write me an article. And then, okay, this isn't right if I do this. And then they're editing it. So there's kind of a bionic writing or hybrid writing. And we'll talk about best practices for that at some point. But what we're going to talk about today is literally building workflows, which is like HubSpot or something like that for your content. I'm talking about 3 tools that let you do that. Some of the use cases for building content workflows are things like, hey, we have an agent that runs on our website now that looks at all of our old content and automatically adds stuff to it that when it needs to be updated. Or another example would be, we have an agent that goes through the website and flags any spelling mistakes for me. I talked about that last week. It's a very simple use case, but it's helpful to know about. Sometimes you'll have an agent that goes out to Reddit. Like one of the things we're building for a lot of our clients, going out to Reddit, getting questions, answering the questions, posting them as draft blogs to the site that we can approve. So that is the use case for the 3 things I talk about. There are a bunch of tools that you can use for these automations, for chaining these actions together. And I'm going to show you 3 today. So I'm going to show you AirOps, I'm going to show you Gumloop, and I'm going to show you n8n, probably not in that order. Each one of these lets you chain actions together, lets you build workflows and agents for your content. But they all do it in a different way, and they're all suitable for different audiences. So let's start with Gumloop. That's where we started. And I'm going to share my screen, I hope. Let's see what happens. See if I can share my screen successfully. Okay, great. So now that you are looking or about to be looking at a specific example of what one of these looks like, let me just review one more time what we are talking about here. We are talking about building workflows with different steps. Here are my topics over here, but they could be articles, and doing things to them like, okay, I'm going to, take my topics and I'm going to split the list and the individual topics. I'm going to run that through a flow. And what the flow is going to do here, whoops, I have this giant FAQ finder thing here. Let's get rid of that. Okay, now you can see my screen. So what this is going to do is take my inputs. In this case, they are topics. And I'm going to do a bunch of stuff with this. I'm going to, see what the Google results are for those. Here, that's what all these purple ones are doing, seeing what the Google results are. Results. Seeing what the Google results are. Seeing what the Google results are. I'm going to read all those in. I'm going to scrape the websites. I'm going to do, and then here is the AI piece where I ask AI, take this data, take this workflow, run in this workflow and take the stuff that I just scraped, the pages that I just found for a specific topic. And AI is going to say, we're going to say to AI, please extract a list of 10 human readable questions from this data. Okay, so that's just familiarizing you again. If you haven't seen one of these before with the concept of this workflow, and then you get a great answer and you can put it in a spreadsheet and do stuff with it. And you can also do stuff like go revise this article, go add FAQs, whatever it is. So just taking a second to familiarize you with the concept of one of these AI workflows. Okay, so let's take a look at Gumloop. This is a tool that is available for building these. And Gumloop looks like this. It's actually, I would say, probably the prettiest, maybe the second prettiest of the tools that we're going to talk about. And like all these tools, it lets you pull in actions. So you can pull in different things. I'm going to hit this plus sign here. I'm going to get all my use AI, ask AI, extract data, categorize things, or core nodes. What are my core nodes? Web scraping, text manipulation, and doing other sort of more advanced stuff, audio processing, all kinds of things are in here. And Gumloop provides you a set of nodes that are very easy to pull in. Gumloop is pretty easy to use. And in terms of who it is designed for, I would say that Gumloop, and we'll talk about AirOps and n8n, Gumloop is designed for people who are kind of in the middle of the other two tools that I'll talk about. Content folks can definitely use Gumloop, but it's designed for people who have a little bit of sophistication in terms of what they know how to develop. The other thing I would say is, though, Gumloop is also constrained in some ways that n8n, which is the other more technical tool I want to talk about, isn't. So that's Gumloop. And Gumloop is for folks who it's great for content engineers. It is not specifically designed for content engineers the way, say, AirOps is, and we'll talk about that next. And if I think about it from a technical perspective, it's also not as technical, not as flexible as n8n. So I would say Gumloop is right in the middle, and it's useful for a bunch of other stuff. So that's what it's designed for. And in terms of ease of use, Gumloop is relatively easy to use once you get to know its quirks. It doesn't have infinite flexibility, but it's relatively easy to use, not as easy to use as some other thing. And it doesn't come with a bunch of pre-baked workflows and agents and other things like that you can use off the bat, the way AirOps might. But it also doesn't require the same level of technical depth as, say, a n8n, which we'll, again, talk about in a minute. So that's Gumloop. And again, Gumloop is going to let you build these workflows. And this is a tool that's getting pretty popular, and it's definitely worth looking at. And I'd say it's right in the middle in terms of who it's designed for. It could be, any of these can be used for anything, but that's that one. In terms of pricing, Gumloop has a kind of credit system where you can, you really have to run it in their infrastructure, and it can get expensive pretty fast. So that's something to be aware of. Not as expensive as some other things, but that's Gumloop, and that's one alternative that you have. After we looked at Gumloop, let's look at AirOps. So I'm going to open up an AirOps flow just so you get a sense. We'll share this tab instead, and hopefully you can see this. So there's a couple things. So AirOps is definitely designed for content engineers. And so if you're watching this and you're a writer, you work in marketing, you're looking to get started with automating a bunch of your content, creating agent-like experiences for your content, agent-like workflows, that is squarely what AirOps is designed for. And it's going to help you in a bunch of ways. If I look at the pre-built nodes in AirOps, and hopefully I can do this without add steps here, you can see they already actually have a bunch of agents here, add internal links, content scorecard, all this other stuff. So this is something that Gumloop does not have because it's not specifically designed for this audience, although they have a bunch of other stuff. It's also something that n8n doesn't have, which we'll get to in a minute why that is. So they've got a bunch of pre-baked agents. AirOps also has this incredibly useful concept of a grid. And the general idea behind a grid is it is a way to set up your workflows to run on a long list of things without intervening. So when I showed you Gumloop a second ago, I had an input box for a bunch of my topics. I had an input box in other workflows. Here, I'll just show you the tab. You'll see there's a few topics in there. Oops, little line breaks. And I often use spreadsheets as an input, for example, for a Gumloop workflow. So I've got a spreadsheet that's kind of floating around. That's both getting the data and pushing the data out to, WordPress or whatever it is, because you're going to want to actually publish this content. AirOps has a lot of that built in. So again, kind of going with this theme of it really is built for content engineers for this specific job, because that thing that you'd have to add with Gumloop, it's not that hard to add, but it is an extra piece to manage, is right here. Is that grid concept. And then the other concept that's baked in here is some pre-built agents, which are okay in terms of quality. You probably want to build your own at some point. And then the other thing that AirOps has, the other two tools do not have, although there's workarounds for them, is integration with whatever CMS you might be using. So if I go here and I go to steps, you'll see that they have a WordPress step. I think they also have a Webflow step. So a lot of the stuff in AirOps is things that you might need to build in a Gumloop or n8n that are already baked into the tool, which is very helpful if this is what you're using it for. Grids, included agents, included integrations to your CMS. These are things that you would have to build for some of the other tools. They're not that hard to build, like I said, but you'd have to build them. Definitely designed for this audience. The only cons for a tool like AirOps are, number one, is pricing. And I don't mean how expensive it is on a month-to-month basis, but I mean that it is a monthly thing. You got to talk to sales. There's a bunch of, it is a real SaaS product, and it's not like a n8n or Gumloop, which are more self-serve. So with this with these additional functionalities that are included in the platform with these integrations, you also are paying a bit extra to get somebody who's being thoughtful about that. And you might be paying a bit extra. You're definitely subscribing, you have contract, all that stuff, which is not true with the other tools. Also, AirOps is a little bit less flexible in terms of what it can do. So one of the things you can see as I'm going through here is that this is essentially a linear workflow, right? There's step after step after step that are, now this is doing things like same stuff that I had in the other workflow, getting the top Google results, getting FAQs from those, building answers to the FAQs, pushing them out to the page, whatever it is. And that's all the same as what we kind of are seeing in the other tools, but there's no loops. I mean, there are loops, but it doesn't quite work the same way. It's a little bit less flexible. It's a little harder to build things that you want. There's less of a community marketplace. So Gumloop and n8n have those things. I didn't see that for AirOps. Maybe it exists and I'm just not aware of it. So that's another thing. So again, the way I would think about AirOps is pre-built tool that you're paying for the convenience, you're paying for the thought, and it's geared at people who are a little bit less maybe wanting to get into the guts of how all these workflows work. So that's AirOps. So we talked about Gumloop and AirOps. I would say Gumloop is right in the middle. AirOps is kind of geared toward content engineers. And then the last thing I'm going to show you all is n8n. So n8n is what we use, and we use it because we spend a huge amount of time building these workflows, and we need something very efficient to let us do that, and very flexible. And so you can see here, even in this diagram, there's it's a little bit less friendly. It's a little AirOps and Gumloop both look nice. They're nice UX experience. n8n sort of has that, but not really. But n8n has a bunch of other things that are super, super useful. So the testing tools in n8n are much better. The troubleshooting, the debugging stuff is much better. And n8n is more technical, harder to use. It doesn't have any of that pre-built stuff that I told you about. So if you want to build a WordPress integration, and actually let's just see. Well, actually, I guess they've added, so this exists. Fantastic. This is in here. And actually, let's just say I'm interested in this. Great. Okay, there you go. So actually, we've got WordPress in here now, but there's still a little bit more stuff that you need to do. Here's Webflow. Fantastic. That's really good to know. It's good for me to know. So that's one thing that actually this has. Gumloop doesn't have this yet, as far as I know. Let's look. WordPress has some of this stuff. All right. So they're all catching up. It doesn't have Webflow. I was just taking a quick look. But the point is that these are not the sort of things that n8n is designed for. So it happens to have a Webflow tool, happens to have a WordPress tool, and that's great. You don't have to build your own. You can ignore what I said about that, but still, it's not specifically designed for this. It's designed for a very flexible set of going through and adding lots and lots of things. And if I look at the sheer number of things that n8n has, I guess I shouldn't have been surprised, because there are so many things in here and you have to find the right thing. And it's a little bit harder to build with n8n. So if I go in here, you can see that I'm getting a lot of exposure to things like API keys and, options and pagination. And here's some JSON, and there's all kinds of other stuff in here. So while it does in fact have some of these integrations, and so don't worry so much about that, it's still a more complicated tool, and it's more geared toward people who are developers, who really want to get into the details here. The thing that gives you is a few other things. So first of all, extremely flexible. You can do whatever you want, even if it's a little bit more finicky. The other thing is that n8n runs a lot more of its workflows locally. And we haven't talked about price for this stuff a lot. We talked about the AirOps model. We've talked about how Gumloop can get a little bit expensive, but n8n tends to be less expensive to run, because when we're doing the scraping, the way n8n is designed is actually doing a bunch of this from your browser. So you're not paying extra for somebody to run all the stuff in the cloud. You still have to pay for your AI bills, which are going to be expensive. But that's another big advantage here. So costs can be lower. And the other thing that's great about n8n that the other tools don't have is it's much easier to share and archive your workflows in n8n. Now, again, you have to know what you're doing. An n8n workflow can be output in a format called JSON, and you can put JSON in something like GitHub. So, it's fantastic for that if you know what all those things mean. If you don't know or don't care what those things mean, that's less useful. But for people who are getting to be more technical content engineers and who maybe have a developer background or, want to learn that stuff, n8n really is a great tool for this. And it's got a lot of flexibility, a lot of ability to kind of shoot yourself in the foot and spend a lot of time, troubleshooting things that maybe you don't need to troubleshoot. But it's great for people who are really also looking to do this stuff at scale. If you want to build a very, very scalable program that does all this stuff, n8n is an awesome tool for that. AirOps is also pretty good for that. Gumloop is okay for that. But n8n really has the best tools for debugging, running things at scale, keeping costs down, doing all this other stuff, even though it's a little bit more technical. So let's kind of recap all the pieces here, and then I think I'm going to wrap up for the moment. And if you have questions and I haven't answered them, I will definitely get back to those, and my apologies. So we've got 3 tools that we can look at. Gumloop is kind of right in the middle, in my opinion, in terms of ease of use and flexibility and how much it's designed for content engineers. And, it costs, but it's a great way to get started. n8n is the other side of this. That is, they're all doing fundamentally the same thing, but it's sort of not in the middle. It's more geared toward people who want to spend time working on logs, understanding JSON, maybe writing some of their own functionality for things that are missing. You still need to use a spreadsheet to manage stuff in your flows in n8n if you want to run a bunch of things. And then AirOps is really geared toward people who are in content departments or in marketing, maybe who are in RevOps, who want to learn content engineering and want a lot less hassle around, yes, they all connect to the CMSs, but that's like a first-class citizen in AirOps. So your WordPress, your Webflow connections are all very easy to set up here. Yes, AirOps doesn't have as much flexibility in terms of some of the loops and the other structures you can use and some of the nodes that are available, the things you can do. Can't configure them with AirOps as much as you can with some of the other stuff, where it's harder. But AirOps has these agents that do certain things for you that are pre-configured, and it has great integrations, like I said. And it also has this concept of grids. And the grids let you not worry about managing work in a separate spreadsheet. And I'll see if I can just show you what a grid looks like real quick. See if I can do that. Let's do a Reddit questions grid. So there you go. So this is like building a little grid. If you use Clay or anything like that, you'll know what a grid is. So that's it. That's it for today. I'm going to pause here and just give you that overview of what these 3 tools are like. They're all really useful. You can't sort of go wrong with any of them. The key thing is to be open to learning how to do this content engineering practice, which is a little bit more like marketing ops than I think a lot of content folks are used to. But once you're open to any of these places, is a great place to start. And it's just some sort of subtle differences in who they're geared toward. At Aircule, we use n8n because we want that technical flexibility, but we have a lot of clients who use AirOps and who use Gumloop and also got satisfaction out of those as well. So let me know if you left any questions, comments. I will respond to those. Always feel free to DM or send me an email. My email address is there. And thanks. Hopefully this was helpful to you. See ya.